Greetings, friends. This video is an interview I did with Dr. John Reizer, a gentleman who reached out to me via email, operates the website NoFakeNewsnet. I've posted the first half of our conversation here to YouTube, and I have started a Rumble channel, which I'll save for conversations that, let's say, are too hot for YouTube. So if you want to get all the juicy bits, I suggest you head over to Rumble and listen to the interview in full. And if you're interested in contacting me and having a conversation like this, I'm more than happy to oblige. My email is oldworldexplorations@gmail.com. And I hope you enjoy this conversation. Thanks for watching. Greetings, old world explorers. Today I'm happy to present to you a new friend of mine, Dr. John Reizer. Welcome, John.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me on, Chris.
I would like to share your website with my viewers just so they get an idea of where you're coming from. So I'll just share my screen here.
Absolutely.
So your website is NoFakeNewsnet. It's a lot of very interesting stuff on there. I'm just going to read your mission statement. I really enjoy it. I can align with a lot of what you're saying here. So NoFakeNewsnet, our website's logo depicts the goal of No Fake News, which is to constantly enlighten and inform the majority of people in our world that reside at the base of the pyramid of knowledge. I guess that would be us. These people represent the most uninformed, misinformed, and lied to members of society. No Fake News is an alternative news site operating outside the influences of the corporately funded mainstream media. Bravo. Our mission is to provide readers with information and opinions about worldwide happenings and subjects that are currently unavailable from other news organizations. And it's a noble feat, I would say, a noble venture to undertake such a thing. What got you started down that path?
Well, Chris, I'll tell you, it's been a long journey. I have a background in health sciences, and I've been a doctor of chiropractic for probably 36 years now. I'm originally from New Jersey, but I went to Sherman College of Chiropractic in Spartanburg, South Carolina, back in 1983, and I began a long career in chiropractic education and health sciences. And the practice of chiropractic is it's an out of the box thinking discipline, healthcare discipline that seeks to allow health by removing natural interferences that occur in the body's spinal column. So when we have misaligned spinal bones, the spinal bones impinge on the nervous system and cause a decrease in health expression, life expression. And so that whole philosophy is centered on things that are natural and for promoting health without pharmaceutical products or drugs and other therapies that sometimes are invasive and actually more harmful to the body than the actual conditions that they set out to treat. So that profession is out of the box, as I say, and it's away from the mainstream. And when you're in a career that is centered on those types of principles, you're naturally looking for a lot of things that are not often told to people in society. And I'll just put it that way. So my career in studying chiropractic and human physiology and more physiology than anatomy is what got me to understand that many of the things that were taking place in traditional healthcare didn't make a lot of sense from a physiological standpoint. They weren't physiological; they were in fact physio-illogical. And that's where it began. And I said, look, I knew at the time that these people are very smart in medicine, doing some of the things that they do in treating patients, yet it goes against the biology of human beings and animal life. And led to another, and it branched off from there. I got into looking at all kinds of things, and I realized that our perception of how things work distorted from the way that they really are. But it's many other things. There are many tentacles that lead back to a giant octopus, and that a lot of things in the world are a lot different than they appear, that they're perceived by most people in society. And that's how my venture into not only chiropractic and healthcare, but into the other subjects that I commonly write about on my platform, that's how they began. And I've always known since a small child, probably 8, 9, 10 years old, it started, that things were a lot different than they appear. And it was just this innate feeling that I've had all my life. And of course, chiropractic came very easy to me as far as the understanding the philosophy and the technical aspects of it as well. But it's something that I really didn't have to try that hard to excel in, and I started there. And so it's been a snowball effect ever since then in many other genres that make up what I call the fabric of our perceived reality. There's many things that make up our reality construct, or what we believe is our reality construct. And that's what I talk about, and that's what I write about. And it's been a passion of mine for a long time to try and be, I guess, a truth teller, or what I believe to be the truth. And because I don't claim to have all the answers. These are a lot of these things are my educated opinions and educated guesses, but I feel that I do know, have a pretty good understanding of the inner workings of a lot of things. And that's how I got to where I am.
I think it sounds like chiropractic medicine has a lot to do with the energy flow of the body, keeping those lines open.
It does. It's a natural, if you look at the nervous system is the conduit of life. It's the conduit of expression. The 75 quadrillion cells that are in our body are connected by the brain through the nervous system. It is the conductor. It creates a symphony, and that nervous system, when the symphony in the body is health. When it's operating properly. When you have interferences to the nerve system, it causes a plethora of physiological challenges. And so where medicine looks to name and categorize and diagnose a specific disease, chiropractic takes a different position in that we're looking to remove an interference so that the natural inborn intelligence of the body can express itself through the nervous system and allow the body to correct itself. We believe, and science has shown, that when you remove interferences from the nervous system, the body has a better chance to be healthy. It has, no matter what the condition is, no matter whether you have a condition or no condition, you always want all of the cells in your body being coordinated properly through the brain so that the nervous system is working properly. And one of the analogies I always used to tell my students was that if you ever went to a symphony and listened to an orchestra, you have a conductor, which is the brain, and then you have all these instruments playing, which could represent the different organs and tissues and cells in the body. And so if you have clear communication between the conductor and the instruments, the music sounds great. But if you were to drop a cloth or a drape cloth between them so that the communication was severed or distorted, it wouldn't take long before the melody and the song and the cadence and the rhythm of the music became not as pretty as it was when there is communication. So in chiropractic, what we do is we don't replace the tuba player or the violin player or whatever instrument. What we do is we remove the curtain so that the communication between the conductor and the orchestra is present, and you have a better expression of musical intelligence when the brain of the concert is being received by the various instruments and the musicians that are in there. So that's the expression of music in the body. It would be the expression of health, with all of the organs, tissues, and cells having a clear and efficient expression from the brain.
That's a wonderful explanation, and I can't help but think, as you explain that, I can't help but think of the old world and my perception of what I'm doing on my channel with my research. You mentioned organ quite a few times in there.
Yes.
I think we're dealing with an interference in the energetic system here in the realm that we live in, and we need to remove that interference. It's an amazing mirror that you set up there, explaining the body. So the micro and the macro seem to be all attached, right? And the energetics of the old world, as we look into a lot of the cymatic patterns in the windows and the organs and a lot of the buildings, and sound frequencies. We think that they're using sound frequencies and the energetics of the ether in our realm. So a lot of parallels there with what you explained, going into the old world research, and how we need to get back to aligning the energy of this realm and remove that interference, removing that curtain, as you said. I thought that was fantastic. Thank you.
Oh yeah, yes, and I agree with you. I think that just from the small amount of time that I've studied your work and that this subject that you bring to the table, I think there are definitely parallels in that and in everything, because the nature of the universe, or the nature of universal law, shows definite patterns, whether we're talking about living systems or even systems that aren't living technically, as biologically, but yeah, there's definitely a pattern and an energy to everything, and removing those interferences can only help any system work more efficiently when it's being expressed properly.
Yeah. So as a seeker of truth, it sounds like you had a similar experience to me when it comes to this the old world research. I've been a couple decades deep into alternative research myself, truth seeker. And I never saw anything, or never really felt anything that related to what I'm calling now the old world until about 2 years ago, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. And we had a conversation a couple of weeks ago, but you sort of shared a similar story. Like you didn't see it coming, but it really aligns with a lot of what your research has told you down through the years. Can you explain a little bit more about that, maybe?
Yeah. I've always had this feeling and this understanding, and I can't explain necessarily why, but I've always had this feeling that there's definitely something that's not coming through in our understanding of the world, that should be. And I always felt like things were distorted or misrepresented by the quote, the powers that be. And I believe that there's a hierarchy of knowledge. I believe that at the highest levels of this hierarchy, that there's an information base that is very, very well known about how universal laws and this entire place we call Earth exists and what it's all about. And I think this information has been hijacked and hidden from most people that exist in our world. I call it the platform. And I think that just from working in many of the areas that I have, including healthcare through the years, and some of the subjects that I discussed, there's definitely a connectedness to these subjects, to these different genres. And that connectivity, for the most part, is attempted by the powers that be, by the mainstream media, to be severed, to be disconnected. I think the mainstream media and a lot of these information, or I call them disinformation outlet sources, spend a lot of time trying to disconnect us, or understanding, or preventing us from connecting the dots and putting it all together. For me, I had something many years ago when I was in chiropractic college that it just came to me, and I was able to I was looking at a DNA molecule. We're looking at the how it would spin, and it was a double helix, and it just looked to me like it was a tuner, like almost like a radio tuner. And it was at that point that I kind of figured out, and later I have definitely believed this to be the case, that the world that we're living in is an expression of a frequency generated platform. And I know a lot of people, when they hear this and when they listen to stuff like this, they probably will, roll their eyes and think that this is so far removed from what they believe. But I believe that if you think, for example, if you look at the world that we see and we perceive every day with our senses, our five senses, the images that we create in our brain are from frequencies. You talked about frequencies just a few minutes ago, and frequencies are everything. I mean, what we see every day, the visual pictures we see are light waves. They're frequencies that go into our eyes, and they're transferred into our brains and converted into visual pictures. What we hear are sound waves. They're frequencies, and that the ear takes those waves in and it funnels it in, and the brain through the nervous system creates sound. And you can talk about the same things with smell. Smell could be, there are molecules, and these molecules, these particles fluctuate between being molecules and frequencies. Everything that we're interacting with in our environment, that our stimuli and that our senses are perceiving, are in the way of frequency signatures. And those frequency signatures are then transmitted into what we see as the world. I believe that even if you take physical matter is particulate matter at the smallest levels, subatomic particle levels. I believe they can fluctuate between particles and frequencies. And these frequencies and particles are what make up everything that is solid. So quantum physicists have already demonstrated that many of the subatomic particles that make the world solid are in fact hollow. They're frequencies. They fluctuate between frequencies and particles. So to me, I believed, and I've always believed for the longest time now, that the DNA, the double helix, is not only a genotypical it's not only a genotypical marker, but and which causes the phenotypical expression of what we see, but I believe it's a tuning device. I think it takes those frequencies and solidifies them in a process which I call solidification, and makes the physical world, the solid world, what we see through a computer. And so I think it's a simulation. I think it's almost a simulation type of scenario.
That's interesting, because as you're explaining that, I'm thinking about again my theories on the old world, on how, what I call them, the usurpers, the ones that came in and I think densified our frequency, bringing us down into what I call the third dimensional frequency, three-dimensional reality, removing us from a higher existence where we're probably more tuned into other frequencies. Some people call it fifth dimensional frequency. I'm not sure exactly how to explain that, but part of my understanding of this old world has to do with the densification of our reality and the altering and the limiting of our DNA, I suppose, and possibly through modification or whatever it might be, and they're keeping us in this third dimensional trap. That's how I perceive some of that. So I don't know if that sort of aligns with what you were saying as well.
Exactly. It's exactly what I'm saying. And I think that we're pretty much on the same track as far as our theoretical understanding of that. I think that the way that these dimensional constructs can exist simultaneously is that where the tuning device is basically going to be the difference between what we can perceive and what we cannot perceive. So if the DNA is tweaked, if the structure of the DNA is tweaked, the field of perception is tweaked as well. If you think of a radio, remember the days when they had radios where you could go up and down the dial and you could turn it? Well, you had all these radio stations or television stations playing at the same time, but our perception is limited by the tuner. When you tune to a certain station, the other ones cease to exist in your perception, but not really. They're all playing at the same time. And so depending on how our DNA is tuned, our levels of perception or understanding of our physical world is a lot different. And so you could have multiple or a plethora of dimensional constructs taking place at the same time, and yet you don't see that. You don't realize or perceive that to be the case. And so our reality is, for us, for most people, is what we perceive. And so that's where I'm coming from.
So I'm thinking of now how you mentioned this hierarchical knowledge system. Now, could it be that those who in positions of power have known about this and use this to manipulate and control this reality? Does that make any sense to you?
Yeah,
and keeping that knowledge from the people, right?
Yes.
Keeping us lower on the pyramid, as your mission statement mentions.
Yes, I do. I think that, in fact, my theory, and it's interesting. I just wrote, Chris. I just wrote I'll call it a science fiction novel. It's called Answers. It's my newest sci-fi novel that just came out. A new sci-fi novel. Okay, so in the story, this is not your traditional type of novel in that it's a lot of characters involved, like I normally would write. This is more or less another persona telling the secrets of the universe. And so Michael Morris is the character in the story, and it's me. And while this takes place, I am on life support in a hospital for 18 days on ventilator, and that part is true. And so these are the impressions of Michael Morris while I was out. While I'm asleep, he's speaking. And so Michael talks all about the innermost secrets of the universe, and that we are living in a frequency generated blueprint. And so he speaks about how these different dimensional constructs exist simultaneously. And depending on how your DNA has been tweaked or modified, you are tuned into certain realities that other people cannot be tuned into. And so Michael speaks of, in the story, speaks of us living many, many lifetimes over and over again as both male and female avatars in a video construct. And there are many, many different video constructs in existence created by creators, ultimate creators. And so Michael speaks of the Earth game, the Earth show, which is where we live. And what he claims is that the elites are an uninvited guest into the back door of this simulation, and that these elites have been doing this in Earth time for thousands and thousands of years, and that they have learned how to reincarnate back into the same bloodlines over and over again, so that they can accumulate knowledge and wealth and can enjoy the experience more than the average person. This is the claim. And so when you look at it from that standpoint, it makes more sense why certain groups have been able to gain more knowledge than others, and that the ancient esoteric secret societies, they've been designed to pass this information onward through the eons of time to the different elite family members that control the world. And that's kind of, I'm being very very general in the explanation. It gets pretty detailed in the story, but that's the gist of that. So, and again, that comes probably, a lot of that comes from my understanding of what's been going on for many years, my interpretation of it. But
yeah, a lot of parallels there with again with my research and yeah, understanding of how things have come to be this way as we follow some of these families, the robber baron families, the initiated families, and we try our best to piece it together. But of course, it's been hidden from us, so all we can do is really put together a picture that probably isn't as clear as we'd like it to be, although clearer now than I think it ever has been for us. But yeah, I resonate completely with what you're saying there too. It's very interesting. So what do you think about the time that we're living in now? Is this the Great Awakening? Is this when we cast off the shackles, or is this an opportunity to do so? What do you think about that idea?
I do. I think that what we're seeing now in society in general is we've reached a titration threshold where you've ever seen some of those chemistry experiments where you're titrating a drop of fluid into a beaker of clear fluid, clear liquid, and you might do 500 of them, and then all of a sudden, on that one drop that you put in there, the color turns bright red, and it's permanently changed. And I think that's what's happening. I think for the longest time, people have been waking up, and I believe we've reached a titration threshold where the chemical changes color, and it's like taking Christmas lights out of a package. When you take those, they're all put in there by machinery, and you pull them out, you can never get them back in there. Yeah. And I think that's what's happening. I think people have reached a level where mass consciousness has taken us to a point where we see what's going on. The genie's out of the bottle, and I think the controlling powers, or whatever it is that's running the show, I think that we've got their concern, and I think that is why some of the things that have been happening in the past few years are happening. And I think I know from your work and I can tell that you believe that there probably was some type of cataclysmic event that occurred probably not that long ago. That most people always tend to think of cataclysms, they always happen millions of years ago. Probably not that long ago. My question is, have these cataclysms, or maybe a better word is these resets, have they occurred often in our society? Have the same group that's been in control for the longest period, routinely orchestrated these resets? We get to a certain level, and then boom, 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 we're knocked down again. And the other thing, and maybe you can allude to your feelings about it. I've always believed that that the powers that be probably have access to technology that has been around for a long time, and then is has been rolled out more recently. Even though we think it's been invented more recently, and after studying some of the stuff that you're speaking about this cataclysm, has it been done in many, many times, over and over again? That's something I don't know.
Yeah, these are all good questions, and I guess we can't really know for sure. Like the cyclical aspect of reality, it definitely does make sense. And it's hard to trust anything that we look into, especially as we peer deeper into the past. So everything's kind of speculation. I know some people in this field of research think it was only happened once. Other people think that this has gone on many times, and it seems to continue. So I'm not sure where I stand on that. Actually, it's very, very difficult. Is there a resetting of the board, and then you get to rebuild it into its beautiful form again, and then these entities find a way to creep back in again and destroy it and control it, and then if that process repeats itself, that's very possible. Or are there different levels of that hijacking? Are there greater hijackings and lesser hijackings? Yeah, all these things are interesting to think about and to consider. I think.
Yeah, they open up more questions because we never really know. Because, like you say, we're trying to pick up the crumbs and the pieces and put them back together. And we don't know what the picture looks like, but we do know that there probably was a picture. And that's the whole thing. Not knowing all the details doesn't necessarily mean you don't know that there's something that happened. We're trying to figure that out. And
yeah, we know that we're being deceived, I think, and that's really, I honestly think that's really all we need to know right now. We need to get that word out, and then as we connect, as we're doing in this conversation, and more people awaken to that, I think that inevitable snowball eventually just comes. It brings it crashing down, right, as the snowball comes down the cliff, or whatever you want to call it. Not
Absolutely.
a great analogy, but yeah. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm sure that's why you're doing what you're doing, is to reach more people. I'm just going to play pictures in the background as we converse. So
yeah, I mean, some of these buildings are absolutely amazing looking, and I mean, I've never even gave any thought to what you're, to this old world exploration before. But after you calling it attention to it and looking at this, I mean, you have to wonder. I mean, look at the streets, look at the people driving around in some of the scenes I've seen, like horse and buggies, and yet these buildings look like, how did they build stuff like this? How did they move the construction materials? How did they without cranes and without having trains bringing the supplies in and power tools? I mean, we take for granted, we see these buildings, and as you have pointed out on many of your videos, these things, they don't look like they fit into that time period,
or what we're told of that time period. So we're seeing a major disconnect, right, between what the historical narrative is saying and what we're seeing, right? And which is amazing that it went on this long without us being able to see it. It's like there was like a thick veil over our perception, it feels like. And all of a sudden it's becoming clearer. And I've talked to several people who say, well, they look at it and look at these pictures in awe now, and with a different understanding. They're seeing something they weren't seeing before.
Chris, it's like those, I think we spoke about it last time. It's like when you go to those pictures where they have some hidden image in them. If you stare at it long enough, you can see it. And some people, you just can't see it. But then once you do see it, you can't stop seeing it.
You can't unsee it.
And that's how it is with these buildings now. You're looking and I'm thinking to myself, there's no way that these buildings could have been put up in the early 1800s, mid 1800s, with that type of technology that we had allegedly had based on the narrative. But
yeah, and people that aren't seeing that yet, because I think eventually we're all going to get there, they just think it's silly to even think about, because I guess it's a paradigm buster for people that haven't allowed it into their reality yet.
Yeah. It's painful. It's painful for people to think outside of the box. I think I like to use the term cognitive dissonance. It's when you've invested in a paradigm, and someone tells you, or something tells you that that's not accurate. You want to reject it. You want to roll your eyes. You want to fall asleep. You don't want to listen to it because it's too difficult to think, number one, that you've been told information by what we believe are authority figures, and that it's not accurate, that we've been deceived. But the greatest way to control a society in the future is to confuse them about their past. Because if you don't know where you came from, you don't know where you are, and you certainly don't know where you're going. And I think that's in this situation, in many situations, I see it in healthcare as well. We are being told things that just aren't accurate. And there are very, very there's a very, very much a concerted effort by big tech corporations to block or censor anything that challenges officialdom. If you challenge the narrative, if you challenge the officialdom that has been laid out, that has been agreed upon to be the reality, you are looked upon as either crazy, a conspiracy theorist that will get people rolling their eyes, or a troublemaker, someone that's a danger to society because maybe the information that you're telling that is a more truthful understanding of reality might be considered harmful by others for health reasons or for other reasons and many different reasons. But it's a good excuse to censor or to prohibit people from learning the truth.
Which I think is a position of weakness, actually. To censor your opponent is completely a position of weakness, because it means you can't defend your argument. All you can do is eliminate whatever's countering it, right? So it's not like you're standing in a confident position of being right and able to shoot down any detractors. It's like you're hiding in a box from any detractors that might come along, right?
That's right. You hit the nail on the head.
And in that, we know that there is a deception, intentional deception, and that they're afraid of any sort of questioning of that deception. It's pretty obvious at this point, I think, for anyone who's willing to see.
Yeah, if you cannot tell that there is censorship and an attempt to impede or block, obfuscate, whatever you want to call it,
yeah.
the reality of of many things, then you're living with your head in the sand. You are very, very I don't know what it's going to take to impress upon people that there's something going on.
It's funny when I get some comments on my videos with people that are sort of offended by the content. It's usually a long comment in a video, and it's very emotionally charged. Mm-hmm. So they have some sort of emotional link to the official's narrative, whether it's grandfather fought in this war, or right. I went to that school, I know this, I know that. And I get also personal attacks, so ad hominem attacks of how stupid I am to even consider such a theory. Right? Those seem to be the two ways that people will come at you when you've offended their sensibilities, I suppose.
Oh, absolutely. And I've gotten the same type of feedback through the years. I've been doing No Fake News now since 2011, 2012. And, the amount of attacks that I would get early on were incredible. Not so much anymore, because I think most of the people that come to my platform have been there for a while. And I think the word's out that it's a different type of a platform. It's not for everybody, that's for sure. But and especially a lot of the health information that I had put out in explaining things for years, it would go against the officialdom of medicine, big medicine, big box medicine, or big pharma. And they don't like it. It's hard to argue, though, because when you listen, I don't censor people on my website. I let comments come through unless they're vulgar or completely, foul language or something like that. Mm-hmm. But if people have a point and they want to make it, I challenge them. I will debate anybody on a lot of these health topics. And, they don't want to do that. They want to just say, well, no, you're a chiropractor and you don't know what you're talking about. My understanding of human physiology is very appropriate. I know what I'm talking about. I know how the body functions, and I know the pathways that have been created to disrupt that function, to create dysfunction. And you can explain something to somebody and you can teach them something, but some of these people have just either emotional or financial ties to paradigms that they just don't want to break free from, because it's either too painful emotionally or too painful financially to depart from them. And
you mentioned financial, and social status goes in with that as well. There's the hierarchy of society. The doctors really have been given the top seat in our society, almost like gods, allopathic medicine especially, right?
Absolutely.
And if anyone who's willing to sort of stick their neck out and point out that there's something wrong with with that whole paradigm, it risks losing not just their financial status, but also that social status that comes with it, that godlike status, which is
that's a big part of it. And I'm not going to do that on this platform today, but I can go down and list after list after list of items that from a physiological standpoint don't make any sense. And yet that's what allopathic techniques and allopathic objectives are centered on. And, it's just, and people get furious when you write about it or when you speak about it. And I've done it for years. And, but I can guarantee you that what I'm telling people is scientifically sound and from a physiological standpoint, and it makes no sense whatsoever to do a lot of these procedures that are being done, but they're still done.
I've touched on the whole hijacking of that medical system and the education system that goes along with it, the whole Rockefeller funding. I'm sure you're pretty well versed in that area. I don't know if you want to mention a little bit about your understanding of how we came to be at this point.
Sure. Yeah, I think that years and years ago, when medical schools began, there was a lot of medical schools that were homeopathic or naturopathic in nature, and they were always in the business of trying to create a better expression of health in the body, a lot like chiropractic. In fact, chiropractic and the medical profession worked hand in hand in the early days with Dr. B.J. Palmer was the developer of chiropractic and had many medical doctors on staff, and they were doing great research. Medicine became hijacked. The Rockefellers, and they sent out a guy, was it Pritchard, that they sent out, and they did a study of all the medical schools and found out that the way to take that cabal down, to take it down, was to only give funding to schools that would, for the most part, offer allopathic or synthetic pharmaceutical products.
So what's the timeline on that? Like when and about did that all go down?
I'm not sure right now. I'd have to look at the records, but I would probably been in the late 1800s, early 1900s. I'm not exactly sure when it was.
That aligns nicely with the old world research.
Yeah.
Go on. Sorry.
You have to look it up. I don't remember right now, but basically in a nutshell, what happened was you went from a lot of medical schools in existence that were practicing naturopathic and homeopathic type of philosophies. Homeopathic simply means that if a person has a fever, a homeopath would do things that would accentuate or actually increase that fever, whereas an allopath goes against that. It would do things to reduce the fever. In chiropractic, we would say that it's better to be naturopathic and just leave it alone, because what is the fever caused from? Is the fever caused from the disease, or is the fever caused from the innate logic of human physiology trying to fight off the disease? And that's exactly what it's trying to do. So, whereas an allopath will try to give you a drug to knock the fever down, a natural way of handling it would let the body's fever kill the infection and do what it wants to do. Giving a chiropractic adjustment would make sure that the nervous system has the ability to take those symptomologies or signs wherever they want to. But going back to the original thing that I was talking about, the pharmaceutical industry took over the medical profession, and they have firm control of it today. There was a editor of the New England Journal of Medicine that left recently, I guess it was in the past few years, and said that 85 to 90% of the medical research that was being performed was the best research that could be bought and paid for by the pharmaceutical industry. And I would venture to say that it's a lot higher than that. It's probably nearly 100%. So when you have for-profit pharmaceutical companies that are making products that are designed never to create a cure, but to manage intellectual properties, as I call them, diseases indefinitely, you are never going to get better and get rid of or eradicate diseases. In fact, they don't want to eradicate diseases, because eradicating diseases is to eliminate intellectual properties, which they own the names and trademark the codes and the diagnostic and procedure codes for insurance companies, which they also own.
That would be a bad business model, right?
That would be a bad business model. Why would you want to ever create a product that would eliminate diseases, and preclude your industry from profiting off of them? It doesn't make any sense. And there's a certain type of products that I will not name because you might want to put this on YouTube that have been in in the highlight of society right now, or
I think we know what you're talking about. Yeah,
they're allegedly supposed to improve health in the body so you don't get sick. Why would they want to do that? What makes no sense at all from a business standpoint. Nothing in healthcare is given away except these things. But so I've always been interested in that big pharma, big medicine thing that's going on, hijacking medicine. So I wrote a story, and I'll plug it right here because I have a chance on your phone. I wrote a story in 2019, a novel called The Target List. And the Target List is a story about these scientists and doctors that create this instrument called the wand. And the wand is an acronym for wave-altering nanoparticle disruptor. It's an instrument that cures cancer and other diseased tissues in the body by shining the wand over the diseased tissues, which then takes those diseased tissues and breaks them down into frequencies, their original starting points. And then the body heals, it recalibrates, or the universe recalibrates those frequencies, and then the wand quickly lets them reset into healthy cells and tissues. So that was the premise for my story.
Do you have it on your website?
What's that?
Do you have it on the website linked?
Yeah, it's called The Target List under my novels. Yeah. And I'm going to, so The Target List was a novel that I published in 2019, and Big Pharma, they find out that this instrument is coming out. It's way down. Just keep on going.
Yeah.
And so they send out an assassin or two to take out these creators, and they're put on the target list because they created this instrument, and these big pharma companies don't want it getting out. So this is it. Yeah. So the target list was published in 2019, and later it became an audiobook on Audible. And it was a self-published book, and it did pretty well. In fact, on my platform, on my No Fake News platform, we delivered over 10,000 copies over a couple of month period of time. And so I wanted to make this into a movie. We wanted to make it into a movie. I had a lot of feedback that said this thing had cinematic potential. And so I found a screenwriter. It was very difficult, but I found her, and her name was MJ Palo, and she's out in Reno, Nevada. And she helped me write the screenplay. We collaborated. She's a much better screenwriter than I. I'm not really a screenwriter, but I learned a lot, and she graciously allowed me to come on, and I got a credit for the screenplay. And I did help out. I did had a lot of input into it, and a lot of editing. But I'm more of a novelist. But MJ, we wrote this screenplay, and she said after it's all done, and by the way, MJ she's a molecular biologist. She's a PhD, and she says to me, "This is a good screenplay. We can sell this." I said, "Really?" And she said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, yeah." And so she convinced me to allow her to take an option on it, and she got it made into what they call a proof of concept film, which is about a 12 or 13 minute film. And it came out on Amazon. Came out on Amazon Prime back in August of 2021. And then I got sick. I got really sick at the time, but that's another story. When I came out of it, she told me that the movie had done very well on Amazon, and they got investors, and so they made the feature film. The feature film was shot in April 2022. Took about 4 or 5 weeks to film it out in Reno. And it was an hour and 40-minute film, and it came out in April of 2023. It's on Amazon Prime, it's on Tubi, it's on Apple, it's on Vimeo, and it's in about 25 different countries right now. It's still in the infancy, but Targetless is the story that I wanted to tell people. And the reason I wanted to tell this story is because it tells this message: Big Pharma is not your friend. And I really wanted people to understand that as healthcare consumers, especially the timing of this movie could not be better because of all the things that have happened in the world in the past 3 years. And I just wanted people to know that Big Pharma is not your friend.
Okay, well, I was just going to say, we'll take the shackles off, and maybe that first, everything before this might go onto YouTube, and speak freely. That everything else will go on Rumble.